He thought he had it all, the billion-dollar empire, the beautiful wife, and the mistress he was smuggling onto his private jet. He ordered champagne destined for St. Bart's, ready to celebrate his perfect deception. But he forgot one thing. He forgot who really owned the plane. When the airstairs locked, it wasn't the co-pilot who came on board. It was his wife. And she didn't come to cry. She came with the pilot and a contract that would destroy his life in 10 minutes flat. The world of Eleonora Vance was one of silent, screaming luxury. Their penthouse on Park Avenue didn't just overlook Central Park. It seemed to own it, the view, a personal, sprawling tapestry that changed with the seasons. Their life was a meticulously curated series of events, the Met Gala, the opening of the Davos Forum summers, in a sprawling, centuries-old villa on Lake Como. They weren't just rich, they were a dynasty. The Vances and the Sterlings, her family, had merged 2 generations ago, creating an unassailable titan of industry, Vance Sterling Global. And at the head of it, at least in the public eye, was her husband, Damien Vance. Damien was a man carved from marble and arrogance. To the world, he was a visionary. He gave interviews to Forbes and the Wall Street Journal about ethical capitalism and market disruption. He was handsome in that sharp, predatory way, with dark hair slicked back and eyes the color of a frozen lake. He wore bespoke Brioni suits and a Patek Philippe watch, the 5711, the blue-dialed model that had a waiting list a decade long. He hadn't waited. To Eleonora, he was an obligation. Their marriage hadn't been a whirlwind romance. It had been a strategic alignment, a merger of bloodlines and stock portfolios. Eleonora, a Sterling, was brilliant. She held an MBA from Wharton and a law degree from Yale. But in Damien's eyes, her brilliance was a quaint accessory, like the Graf diamonds he bought her for their 10th anniversary. He saw her as the chief operating officer of their domestic life, the perfect hostess, the elegant statue at his side, the mother to their 2 currently away at an exclusive Swiss boarding school children. He fatally underestimated her. While Damien played the role of the corporate gladiator, Eleonora, by choice, managed the family's softer assets. This was his categorization, not hers. To him, soft meant the multi-million-dollar charity foundations, the vast art collection, the property management of their global real estate, and crucially, the Vance Sterling private fleet. This was the LLC that managed their helicopters, their fleet of armored Maybachs, and their 3 private jets. Damien saw the jets as his personal taxi service. Eleonora saw them as what they were, 150 million in highly regulated, rapidly depreciating assets. She managed the maintenance schedules, the pilot's certifications, and the complex international flight registrations. She knew the call sign of every plane. The suspicion began not as a crack, but as a hairline fracture. It was a charge on one of the secondary accounts, a dinner at Per Se on a night he was supposed to be in Chicago. A $4,000 charge. Not a massive sum, but wrong. He'd claimed he ate room service at the Peninsula. Eleonora was a woman who balanced billion-dollar ledgers. A $4,000 discrepancy was an itch she had to scratch. She didn't confront him. Confrontation was messy, and Damien was a master of gaslighting. He would turn it around, make her seem paranoid jealous. "Are you tracking my expenses now? Eleonora, is your trust in me really that fragile?" No. Eleonora did what she did best. She initiated an audit. She hired Juliana Thorne, a discreet private investigator whose name was passed around the upper echelons of New York society like a secret. Juliana didn't look like a PI. She looked like a Vogue editor, all sharp angles and sharper instincts. Within a week, Juliana had delivered a slim, devastating file. The $4,000 dinner was just the appetizer. There was an apartment subleased in Soho under a shell corporation. There were gifts: a Cartier Love bracelet, the one with diamonds, a Birkin bag which required a purchase history. Eleonora knew he didn't have, meaning the girl had connections of her own. And then there was the girl. Her name was Chloe Summers. She was 24, a former model-turned-influencer who specialized in wellness and aspirational living. Her Instagram was a curated feed of rooftop pools, exclusive clubs, and cryptic captions about knowing your worth. She was the living, breathing cliché, the predictable, disposable choice of a man entering a midlife crisis of the ego. Eleonora felt a cold, sharp pang. It wasn't the searing jealousy of a betrayed lover. It was the icy disdain of an engineer watching a critical component fail due to a laughably simple design flaw. Damien wasn't just a cheat. He was unoriginal. The real pain came later, when Juliana's forensic accountant dug deeper. Damien wasn't just cheating on her. He was cheating her. He was siphoning money. Not just from the slush fund account they all had. He was diverting funds from Vance Sterling Global itself, using the Soho shell company, Vance Strategic Solutions, to bill the parent company for consulting fees. He was funneling millions, building a nest egg. He wasn't just planning a vacation with his mistress. He was planning an exit, and that Eleonora could not abide. This wasn't just her marriage. This was her father's legacy, her children's birthright. This week, Damien was planning a critical business trip. "It's Zurich, darling," he'd said over breakfast, not looking up from his Financial Times. Meeting with the bankers at Credit Suisse. Utterly dull, but necessary. "I'll be gone till Sunday." He'd kissed her a dry peck on the cheek that smelled of expensive cologne and lies. That afternoon, Eleonora received a notification from her asset management dashboard. It was a flight request logged by Damien's executive assistant. Aircraft Gulfstream G650ER registration N45 Ida EV. Destination Gustav III. Airport St. Barthélemy. Passenger manifest D. Vance C. Summers. Catering request chilled Dom Perignon Rosé caviar vegan platter for Ms. Summers. Eleonora stared at the screen. The EV in the registration number stood for Eleonora Vance. It was her jet, the one her father had gifted her when she got her pilot's license, long before Damien. He was taking his mistress on her plane to the Caribbean while claiming to be in Switzerland. And he was funding it all with stolen money. A slow, cold fire began to burn in Eleonora's chest. The shock evaporated, replaced by a crystalline, chilling clarity. He thought she was the docile, naive wife. He thought she was soft. He had no idea who he was married to. "Juliana," Eleonora said into her phone, her voice perfectly calm. "Cancel my appointments for the rest of the week. And please get me Captain Hayes on his personal line." The game was on. Damien Vance believed he was a master of the universe, a puppeteer pulling the strings of a world that bent to his will. His mistake was in believing Eleonora was one of his puppets. In truth, she was the one who had built the stage, written the play, and owned the theatre. While Damien was busy at board meetings, which Eleonora now knew were long lunches with Chloe at Daniel. Eleonora was in her own war room. Her private study, once a place of quiet portfolio management, transformed into the headquarters of a corporate takeover. The first call was to Captain Marcus Hayes. Marcus was the chief pilot of the Vance Sterling private fleet. He was a tall, imposing man with a ramrod-straight posture, a relic of his 20 years as a C-17 pilot in the Air Force. He was quiet, meticulous, and radiated an aura of unflappable competence. He did not like Damien Vance. Damien treated the flight crew like uniformed valets, snapping his fingers for more whiskey and complaining if the turbulence was inconvenient. Eleonora, on the other hand, knew the names of Marcus's children. She had personally intervened when his daughter Sarah was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder, ensuring the corporate insurance, which Damien's CFO had tried to fight, covered the experimental treatment 100%. Eleonora had saved his daughter's life. Marcus Hayes would fly into a hurricane for Eleonora Vance. "Marcus," she said, when he picked up his secure cell. "It's Eleonora. I need your absolute discretion and your full cooperation. It concerns Mr. Vance." There was a pause. "Mrs. Vance, you've always had both. What's the situation?" "Mr. Vance has a flight scheduled for Friday. Teterboro to St. Bart's on the G650. "Yes, ma'am. We're filing the flight plan now. A business trip, his office said." The subtle emphasis on business told Eleonora everything. Marcus already knew. He'd seen the passenger manifest. He just hadn't known what to do about it. "That flight will proceed as planned, Marcus, with one change. The passenger manifest is incorrect. Ms. Summers is not a guest. She is an unauthorized passenger on a corporate asset." "Understood. Shall I deny her boarding?" "No." Eleonora said, a new iciness in her tone. "No, I want her to board. I want them both to feel perfectly secure. You will greet them, you will have the champagne chilled, and you will prepare for takeoff." "And?" Marcus asked, sensing the other shoe. "And you will wait for my signal. I will be at Teterboro. I will be boarding the plane last. And I will be bringing the flight contract." "Mrs. Vance," Marcus said, the respect in his voice replaced by something harder, a warrior recognizing a fellow general. "It will be my distinct pleasure to command that flight. One more thing, Marcus. Can you ensure the aircraft's internal Wi-Fi is unreliable? I don't want Mr. Vance to have any external communication once we are on the move. I can disable the satellite uplink for a diagnostic check just before boarding, ma'am. It might not come back online until we reach our destination." "Our new destination, Captain." "Yes, ma'am." With the air support handled, Eleonora moved to the financials. She and Juliana's forensic accountant, a caffeine-fueled genius named David, burrowed into the labyrinth of Damien's deception. It was worse than she thought. Vance Strategic Solutions wasn't just a vehicle for the apartment and the jewelry. It was a full-scale siphon. Damien had been using it to issue fraudulent invoices against the parent company, Vance Sterling Global. Consulting fees for the new Singapore expansion. Geopolitical risk analysis for the Dubai merger. He had billed them for $8.2 million in the last 6 months alone. The money wasn't sitting in a New York bank. It had been wired to a series of offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and then cleverly to a private bank in Zurich. Zurich. The irony was bitter. He'd used his alibi as the destination for his stolen fortune. "He's been liquidating Eleonora," David said, pointing to a screen. "He's been slowly selling off non-core stock options, diversifying his personal portfolio away from Vance Sterling and converting it to cash and gold bullion. He's not just cheating, he's bolting. He's planning to leave you with a massive hole in the Q4 books and disappear." This was the ultimate betrayal. Not the affair, not the lies. It was the breathtaking arrogance of believing he could steal her family's legacy and that she would be too stupid and too passive to notice. He was trying to bankrupt their joint holdings to fund his new life with a 24-year-old. "David," Eleonora said, her voice dangerously quiet. "I need a full accounting of every dollar he's moved. I need the wire transfer receipts, the bank codes, and a comprehensive report on the tax implications of this fraud. Can you have that for me by Friday morning?" "Eleonora, this is a month's work." "David, you have 36 hours. David just nodded, cracked his knuckles, and ordered more coffee. Eleonora's final call was to her father, Arthur Sterling. He was the Sterling in Vance Sterling, a titan of old-world industry, now semi-retired in Palm Beach. "Eleonora, my dear, what a surprise," he boomed. "Father," she said, cutting to the chase, "I need you to call an emergency meeting of the board, and I need you to grant me your full proxy." The line went silent. Arthur Sterling was not a man for trivialities. "What's he done? He's been defrauding the company father. Millions. He's planning to run." "The girl," Arthur spat. He too had his sources. "I told you he had no honor." "Yes. Well, I am about to teach him the meaning of it. I need the board meeting set for Friday at 5 p.m. I will be calling in. And I need you to trust me. I am handling this. He's your husband, Eleonora. He's a liability father. And we both know what we do with liabilities. We liquidate them." Arthur chuckled a dry, harsh sound. "That's my girl. You have my proxy. You have the full power of the Sterling Trust behind you. Burn him to the ground." Eleonora hung up. She looked at the file in front of her. The flight plan. The wire transfers. The photos of Chloe laughing on a balcony in her husband's stolen apartment. She selected a wardrobe for Friday. Not a mourning dress. Not a wronged wife outfit. She pulled out a steel-grey Tom Ford suit with a razor-sharp silhouette. It was armor. She was no longer Eleonora Vance, the hostess. She was Eleonora Sterling, the executioner. Captain Marcus Hayes hung up the secure phone. He stood in the sterile, brightly lit operations office of Aura Aviation, the LLC Eleonora had created to manage the fleet. The office was located in a discreet corner of Teterboro Airport, far from the lavish main terminals where the billionaires arrived. This was the nerve center where the real work was done. Marcus looked at the flight plan on his screen, Teterboro KTEEB to St. Barthélemy TFFJ. A challenging flight requiring a steep descent over a hillside onto a short runway. It was a pilot's airport, and Damien loved it because it was exclusive. Marcus adjusted his tie. His loyalty to Eleonora Vance was absolute, forged, not just in gratitude but in professional respect. He'd watched her for years. He'd seen her land a Challenger 350 in a tricky crosswind in Aspen, a feat that had made the other pilots in the lounge stop and watch. She wasn't just an owner, she was a pilot. She understood the mechanics, the risk, the why. Damien, by contrast, had once demanded Marcus fly faster to beat a snowstorm as if a G650 was a sports car, and FAA regulations were mere suggestions. Damien was a passenger in life. Eleonora was a pilot. His co-pilot for the flight, a young, sharp-as-a-tack woman named Kira, walked in. "Captain got the manifest for the St. Bart's trip. Catering is confirmed. Dom and caviar. And a vegan plate." Marcus nodded grimly. "Kira, this flight is going to be unconventional. We're going to follow Mr. Vance's requests to the letter, right up until the moment we close the main door." Kira raised an eyebrow. Sir, our real principal, Mrs. Vance, will be joining us at the last minute, and she will be taking command of the flight." Kira's eyes widened, then narrowed in understanding. She too had been on the receiving end of Damien's acidic arrogance. "And the second passenger, Ms. Summers. Ms. Summers is about to have a very, very bad day," Marcus said. "I want you to conduct the pre-flight check 3 times. I want this bird to be flawless. Mrs. Vance is handling the what. We are handling the how. Our job is to be the most professional, implacable, and unmovable crew in the sky. When I give the word, we are a steel box. No one gets on, no one gets off, and the on-air phone and Wi-Fi systems are to remain inoperable until I say otherwise. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, Captain," Kira said, a small, tight smile playing on her lips. "I'll go check the diagnostics on the satellite uplink right now. Looks like a faulty inverter. Might take all flight to fix." "Good," Marcus said. "That's very good." Meanwhile, Eleonora was moving her own pieces. She wasn't just planning to confront Damien, she was planning to dismantle him. She spent Thursday with the lawyers. Not their lawyers, the high-gloss corporate firms that Vance Sterling kept on retainer. These were her lawyers from a shark-infested boutique firm that specialized in high-conflict, high-asset dissolution. They worked for 12 hours straight, fueled by coffee and Eleonora's meticulous evidence. The goal, an emergency injunction. "We can't just freeze his personal accounts." The lead lawyer, a woman named Ms. Petrov, explained, her pen tapping a rhythm of doom on the table. "He'll claim spousal privilege, fight it, and by the time we untangle it, the money in Zurich will be in Singapore. We need to go bigger." "The board," Eleonora said. "I have my father's proxy. I control 52% of the voting shares." "When is the meeting?" "Friday 5 p.m., after I'm on the plane." "Good," Petrov said. "At 5:01 p.m. we use your new authority as acting CEO, which the board will grant you to file a corporate malfeasance lawsuit against Damien Vance and his shell company. We name him as a bad actor. That combined with this evidence of fraud will be enough for an emergency judge to issue a TMO, a temporary restraining order, freezing all assets associated with Vance Strategic Solutions and, more importantly, all accounts he's used to funnel money from the parent company. He'll be locked out. By the time he lands, he won't have a working credit card," Eleonora finished. "He won't have $1 to his name," Petrov corrected. "He'll be a defendant in a billion-dollar lawsuit, and his only assets will be the patek on his wrist and the clothes on his back." The plan was brutal. It was beautiful. Eleonora left the law office well after midnight. She didn't go home to the empty penthouse. She checked into the Carlyle under a false name. She needed a neutral corner, a place with no memories. She ordered tea and a simple salad, and for the first time in 48 hours, she allowed herself to feel. It was not the sobbing grief she might have expected. It was a hollow, aching void. The man she had built a life with, the father of her children, was a common thief. A cheap, predictable con man, dressed in bespoke suits. She wasn't mourning the loss of her husband. He had been gone for years. She was mourning her own time, her own wasted loyalty, her own willingness to believe that their strategic alignment had contained at least a core of mutual respect. He had respected her so little he thought she was an idiot. That thought, more than any other, sealed his fate. The ache in her chest hardened, the void filled with ice. She slept for 4 hours, a deep, dreamless sleep, and woke up feeling not rested, but resolved. Friday morning, the day of departure. Eleonora's first stop was a bank vault where she retrieved the hard copies of the documents. The original LLC charter for Aura Aviation, bearing her sole signature as managing director. The articles of incorporation for the Sterling Family Trust, which she was pleased to remember, held the controlling interest in the G650ER as a non-negotiable, non-transferable family asset. Damien had signed the spousal waiver without reading it board during their pre-ENIP negotiations 15 years ago. He had given her the gun and the bullets, and then shown her exactly where to aim. She assembled the final piece, a leather-bound folio. In it, she placed the Aura Aviation Charter. 2. The Sterling Trust Ownership Contract for N450EV. 3. The actual flight contract, which listed her as the principal in command. 4. A summary of the $8.2 million in fraudulent wire transfers. 5. A printed 8x10 glossy photo from Juliana showing Damien and Chloe kissing on the balcony of the Soho apartment. She zipped the folio. She put on her suit. She looked in the mirror. The woman looking back was not a wife. She was a CEO. She was a Sterling. She got in her Bentley, not the one Damien leased, but her own, the one she'd had since law school, and drove herself to Teterboro. She didn't go to the main terminal. She went to the Aura Aviation Operations Office, where Captain Marcus Hayes was waiting his uniform, impeccable. His expression grim. "Mrs. Vance?" he said with a crisp nod. "Captain," she replied, her voice even. "Is the aircraft ready?" "She is, ma'am. Mr. Vance and his guest arrived at the signature terminal 10 minutes ago. They are boarding as we speak." "Excellent. Let them get comfortable. Let them order the champagne. Give them 5 minutes. Then you and I will walk over." "And the flight plan, ma'am?" Marcus asked. "St. Bart's." Eleonora looked out the window at the gleaming blue and white Gulfstream G650ER parked on the tarmac. Her G650. "No, Marcus," she said. "Change of plans, file a new route. Teterboro to, let's see. I need somewhere cold inconvenient and with a good long runway. How about Omaha, Nebraska? We have a regional office there that needs an audit." Marcus almost smiled. "Omaha. Yes, ma'am. A fine choice this time of year. I'll file the new plan. They'll never know the difference until we're in the air." "Oh, they'll know," Eleonora said, picking up her leather folio. "They'll know before you even close the door." Teterboro Airport was not like a commercial airport. It was a quiet, antiseptic world of exclusive luxury. There were no lines, no TSA, no screaming children. There was only the whisper of money and the low whine of turbines. Damien Vance swept into the signature flight support terminal like he owned the place. In his mind, he did. He was in his element, a crisp Loro Piana cashmere sweater over a white shirt. Sunglasses on, even indoors. He was a man performing the role of billionaire on the move, and he loved his audience. His audience of one Chloe Summers was trotting slightly behind him, trying to look as casual as he did, but she couldn't help it. Her eyes were wide, and her phone was half out of her pocket, itching to take a selfie. She was 24, and had never flown private before. This, to her, was the jackpot. She was dressed for St. Bart's, a white linen jumpsuit that was trying too hard platform espadrilles that were impractical for air stairs, and the new, blindingly white Birkin Damien had bought her. She looked less like a travel companion and more like expensive high-maintenance luggage. "Damien, baby, it's huge," she whispered as they were led through a private door onto the tarmac. The Gulfstream G650ER sat shimmering in the cold November sun. It was a $70 million needle of aerospace perfection, its white paint and single blue racing stripe immaculate. "It's the G650, baby, the long-range model," Damien said dismissively, as if he were discussing a car. "Fastest thing in the sky. Gets us to St. Bart's in time for a late lunch." A flight attendant, a calm, professional woman in her 40s, hand-picked by Marcus, greeted them at the stairs. "Welcome, Mr. Vance." "Thank you, Maria. Have the Dom Rosé chilled. We're celebrating." "Right away, sir." They boarded. The interior was a cocoon of beige, leather-polished, dark walnut veneer and brushed platinum fixtures. It was designed for 16 but configured for 8, maximizing space and luxury. There was a private stateroom in the back, a full galley, and seats that reclined into full beds. Chloe was practically vibrating. She ran a hand over the supple leather. "This is insane. It smells like a new car." "It's better than a new car, Chloe," Damien said, settling into one of the large captain's chairs. He motioned for her to sit opposite him. He unclipped his Patek, a casual, obnoxious gesture, and tossed it onto the console between them. "This," he said with a grand sweep of his arm, "is freedom. This is what you get when you're not afraid to take what you want." Chloe looked at him with pure, unadulterated adoration. This was the man who was going to change her life. He was powerful, rich, and he was all hers. She'd won. She'd beaten the Ice Queen wife, the sterling heiress. "To taking what we want," she purred, leaning forward. The flight attendant returned with the champagne. It was, as requested, Dom Perignon Rosé Vintage 2008. She poured 2 flutes the pale pink liquid, fizzing elegantly. "Enjoy, Mr. Vance. The co-pilot is finishing her pre-flight checks, and Captain Hayes will be on board momentarily to greet you. We should be airborne in 15 minutes. "Perfect," Damien said, taking a sip. He leaned back, closing his eyes. He was already in St. Bart's. He was already on the yacht. He was already free of Eleonora, of the board, of the crushing weight of his old life. The $8.2 million in Zurich was his new beginning. Chloe was less relaxed. She was snapping selfies, holding the champagne flute in one hand, her other hand forming a pout. She angled the phone to get the Gulfstream logo on the headrest in the shot. "Living home. Best life. IYKYK. Private jet." She frowned. The Wi-Fi signal was absent. "Babe?" "The Wi-Fi is down," she complained. "I can't post." "Who cares?" Damien muttered, his eyes still closed. "We're going to be off the grid. That's the whole point. Put the phone away. Disconnect. Be here." Chloe pouted, but complied. She didn't like being disconnected. If a private jet trip happened and you couldn't post it on Instagram, did it even happen at all? They sat in the silent, opulent cabin for 5 minutes. The engines weren't on. The only sound was the hum of the auxiliary power unit. Damien was starting to get impatient. He hated waiting. He was about to press the call button when he heard it, the heavy thud and click of the air-stair mechanism re-engaging with the fuselage. The door hadn't closed. It was being held. "What now?" he snapped, opening his eyes. Heavy, measured footsteps were coming up the stairs. Not the light step of the flight attendant. Not the quick tread of a co-pilot. "Hold the door," a voice said. A voice that did not belong. A voice that was female, clear and cold as Arctic ice. Damien sat bolt upright. He knew that voice better than his own. Chloe, confused, turned to the door. "Who is—" and then she appeared. Eleanora Vance did not storm the plane. She entered. She was framed in the doorway of the jet, a silhouette against the bright tarmac. She was wearing the steel-grey Tom Ford suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon. She wore no jewelry except her wedding ring and a simple, cold Cartier tank watch. She looked like a CEO. She looked like an executioner. She looked terrifying. Beside her, filling the other half of the doorway, was Captain Marcus Hayes. He was in his full pilot's uniform, complete with the 4 stripes of a captain on his epaulettes. He was holding a thick, leather-bound folio. He looked as immovable as a mountain. Damien Vance's face went through 3 distinct phases in 2 seconds. 1. Shock. A complete, slack-jawed inability to process what he was seeing. 2. Rage. A sudden crimson flush that started at his collar and climbed to his hairline. 3. Contempt. A sneer reforming his features as he regained his footing. Eleanora. He spat his voice a low growl. What in the hell do you think you're doing? This is a private flight. Get off my jet. Chloe was frozen. She recognized the woman from the Vogue articles, from the photos in Damien's house she'd secretly looked at. This was the wife. The real wife. And she was not supposed to be here. Chloe suddenly felt very small, very cheap, and very, very cold. Eleanora took 1 step into the cabin, her heels making a sharp, definitive click on the floor. She did not look at Chloe. She did not acknowledge her existence. The cut was so deep, so absolute, it was more insulting than any scream. Her eyes the color of a winter sky locked onto Damien's. That's where you're wrong, Damien, Eleanora said, her voice perfectly level, carrying easily through the small cabin. It's not your jet. She paused, letting the statement hang in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the cabin. I'm here, she continued, to discuss the flight contract. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to Marcus. He stepped forward into the cabin and stood at parade rest, blocking the exit. The trap was set. The door was closed. The silence in the cabin was no longer luxurious. It was suffocating. The Dom Rosé sat untouched in Damien's flute, its bubbles dying. Chloe looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a platinum-plated Rolls-Royce, her face pale beneath its expensive tan. Damien was the first to recover, falling back on his most trusted weapon, pure, unadulterated bluster. I'm not going to ask you again, Eleanora, he snarled, standing up. He was taller than her, a fact he'd always used to his advantage, looming over people to intimidate them. It didn't work. Eleanora didn't flinch. She just watched him. Her expression one of mild clinical curiosity, as if he were a specimen in a jar. This is my flight, my meeting. You are trespassing. Marcus. He snapped, turning on the pilot. Get her off this plane. Now, you're fired. Captain Marcus Hayes didn't even blink. He looked past Damien, his gaze focused somewhere on the cockpit bulkhead. I'm afraid I can't do that, Mr. Vance. What do you mean you can't? I sign your paychecks. I own you. No, sir, Marcus said, his voice flat and deep. You don't. I work for Aura Aviation LLC, and my flight clearance is only authorized by the principal owner and administrator of that LLC. And that, Eleanora said, taking another step into the cabin, is me. She held up her hand, and Marcus, in a perfectly rehearsed move, opened the leather-bound folio. He handed her the first document. I don't know what fantasy world you're living in, Eleanora. Damien scoffed, though the first bead of sweat had appeared on his temple. This jet is a corporate asset, Vance Sterling. Not quite, Eleonora said. She held up the paper. This is the Articles of Incorporation for Aura Aviation, the legal entity that holds the title to this aircraft. It's a subsidiary, you see, but not of Vance Sterling Global. It's a subsidiary of the Sterling Family Trust. She let him process that. The Sterling Trust was her family's trust, the one his lawyers had tried and failed to crack during the prenup. And this, she continued, taking the next document from Marcus, is the specific ownership contract for Gulfstream G650ER registration N450EV. The EV, in case you've forgotten, stands for Eleonora Vance. It was a gift from my father. And this, she tapped a clause at the bottom, is the spousal waiver you signed relinquishing all control and interest in said asset. Damien's face was turning a mottled, ugly shade of red. It's a technicality. A piece of paper. I am the CEO. You were the CEO, Eleonora corrected him, and the shift in tense hit him like a physical blow. As of, well, about 2 hours ago, my father and I convened an emergency teleconference with the board. You can't do that. That's not legal. Oh, it's perfectly legal when the acting CEO is demonstrably defrauding the company. This was the first time Chloe moved. Her head snapped toward Damien. Fraud. Eleonora finally turned her head and bestowed a single icy glance upon the 24-year-old. You must be Chloe, she said. Her voice wasn't kind. It wasn't angry. It was the voice of a person brushing away an insignificant piece of lint. The Cartier bracelet is lovely. Was that purchased with the Q3 operations budget? Or was it from the Geopolitical Risk Analysis Fund? It's so hard to keep track. Chloe shrank back, her hand instinctively flying to her wrist, to the $12,000 diamond-studded bangle. She suddenly looked like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes. You shut your mouth, Damien roared, taking a step toward Eleonora. Don't you talk to her. Before he could take a second step, Captain Marcus Hayes moved. He wasn't fast, but he was there, a solid wall of blue uniform, between Damien and Eleonora. He didn't touch Damien. He didn't have to. He just stood, his 6'4" frame radiating "Don't try it." Damien, for all his bluster, was a businessman, not a fighter. He stopped. Thank you, Marcus, Eleonora said calmly. She turned back to her husband. You are a fool, Damien. A cliché. Did you really think I wouldn't notice 2 million was missing? Did you think I wouldn't find Vance Strategic Solutions, your sad little slush fund? She pulled the next document from the folio. It was the summary of the wire transfers. This is the part where you're supposed to be in Zurich, isn't it? She said almost conversationally. It's a good alibi. It's also where you sent the money. Very efficient. I'll give you that. You're insane, Damien stammered, his bravado crumbling, replaced by the naked twitching panic of a cornered rat. You're making this up. Am I? Eleonora pulled out the last item, the 8x10 glossy photo. She didn't show it to him. She walked past him, past the fuming, impotent rage, and stood in front of Chloe. Chloe flinched. Eleonora didn't say a word. She just dropped the photo into Chloe's lap. It was the picture of her and Damien kissing on the Soho balcony, a bottle of champagne in the frame. The date and time were stamped in the corner. Chloe looked at the photo, then up at Damien, her eyes wide with a new dawning horror. This wasn't a lover's quarrel she'd walked into. This was something else. This was a war. You think you're his partner, Eleonora said, her voice soft now, and all the more terrifying for it. You're a line item, dear. An expense. and I'm the auditor." She turned back to Damien. The interruption was over. The execution was about to begin. "So," Eleonora said, clasping her hands in front of her, "we have a problem. You see this flight? It's not going to St. Bart's." Damien's panic-slicked face twisted into a mask of confusion. "What are you talking about? Of course we're going to St. Bart's. Marcus filed the damn flight plan." "The flight plan is filed, Mr. Vance," Marcus replied. His voice still that impassive, maddening monotone. "It was filed 20 minutes ago, by me, on Mrs. Vance's authority." "A new plan," Eleonora clarified, walking back to the center of the cabin. She was in control. The space was hers. The air was hers. "This aircraft," she said, as if addressing a slow-witted child, "is not a toy. It's a corporate asset, and as such its use must be justified. A weekend tryst with an influencer doesn't meet the criteria for a legitimate business expense, so I've corrected your little clerical error." "You have no right," Damien bellowed. "I have every right." Eleonora countered, her voice finally rising sharp and clear as a ringing bell. "This is the flight contract, Damien. It's the charter agreement between the lessee, which you pretended to be on behalf of Vance Sterling Global, and the owner, Aura Aviation, which is me. And this contract contains clauses." Damien's face was blank. He'd never read a contract in his life. He paid people to do that. Clause 4B. Eleonora continued tapping the final document Marcus held. "Use of aircraft. Aircraft shall be used only for legitimate business purposes, as defined by the parent company's bylaws." And Clause 9. Misrepresentation. Any material misrepresentation, fraudulent booking, or transport of unauthorized persons shall be considered a terminal breach of this contract. "So what?" Damien sneered. "So you fine me. Send me the bill." Eleonora let out a single, sharp laugh. It was a horrifying sound. "A terminal breach. Damien means the owner has the right to terminate the journey, impound the aircraft, and redirect it to a destination of their choosing. For inspection. For an audit." She paused, savoring the moment. "So congratulations on your trip. Captain Hayes, what is our new destination?" "Epley Airfield, Omaha, Nebraska, ma'am," Marcus said. "We have a 7-hour flight time pending air traffic. We'll be landing just in time for the legal teams to meet us." "Omaha." Damien choked out the word as if it were poison. "Omaha, Nebraska. Are you insane?" "We have a regional processing center in Omaha, Damien. You know, the one you tried to sell off last year. Well, it's the perfect place for a full on-site audit of your division's spending. I have a team of forensic accountants flying in from Chicago to meet us there. They are very excited to go over your expense reports." The color drained completely from Damien's face. Omaha. It wasn't just a place. It was a symbol. It was mundane. It was humiliation. It was the end of his glamour and the beginning of his consequences. Chloe finally found her voice. It was high and trembling. "Omaha. I'm not going to Omaha." Eleonora turned to her, her patience finally snapping. "You will go, wherever this plane takes you, Ms. Summers. Or you can get off, right now." This was the choice. The trap. Damien saw it. If he stayed on the plane, he was admitting guilt, flying into the hands of the auditors, a prisoner in his own $70 million toy. If he got off, he was stranded on the tarmac at Teterboro. His power evaporated, his authority gone. He tried a third option, I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you. We're going to sit here until you see reason." He crossed his arms, a petulant child. "I'm afraid that's not an option either," Marcus said, checking his watch. "The FAA has approved our departure slot. If we don't move in the next 5 minutes, we'll be fined for loitering on the tarmac. And as the principal in command, Mrs. Vance, has already authorized the cabin doors to be secured for departure." He motioned to Kira, the co-pilot, who was now standing at the top of the air stairs. Kira nodded. "This is your last chance, Damien," Eleonora said. "The choice is simple. It's the Damien Vance option or the Eleonora Sterling option." "What the hell does that mean?" "The Damien option is this. You stay on this plane. You fly to Omaha. You will be met by lawyers and auditors. You will be stripped of your position. Your assets will be frozen, and you will face a federal investigation for corporate fraud. You will, in short, be ruined. But you'll get to fly private one last time." She took a breath. "The Eleonora option is this. You get off, right now. You take her." She jerked her chin at Chloe. "And you get off my plane. You walk back to the terminal. You call an Uber, and you go to your stolen apartment and wait for the summons to arrive." Damien stared at her. He was processing. He was a man who loved loopholes, and he was desperately searching for one. "And if I get off, what happens?" he asked, his voice now a hoarse whisper. "The board meeting still happens," Eleonora said. "The injunction still gets filed. You are still ruined. The only difference is I get to take my plane and I'm still going to St. Bart's." This was the final exquisite twist of the knife. She was taking the vacation he had planned. You bitch." He breathed the word heavy, with a new terrified respect. "I'm a Sterling Damien," she corrected him. "We built this world. You just lived in it. And your lease is up." She looked at her watch. "You have 60 seconds to decide. After that, Captain Hayes has my authority to have airport security remove you." Damien looked at Chloe. Her face streaked with tears, her Birkin bag clutched in her lap like a flotation device. He looked at Eleonora, cold, beautiful, and triumphant in her armor of Tom Ford. He looked at Marcus, a stone-cold sentinel. He was trapped, and he knew it. His arrogance, his one true companion, made the decision for him. He would not be flown to Omaha like a common criminal. He would never give her the satisfaction. "Fine," he spat, grabbing his coat. "Fine. You win. You take the damn plane." He grabbed Chloe by the arm, yanking her from the seat. "Get up. We're leaving." "But my bag," Chloe cried, pointing at her Louis Vuitton suitcases, which were presumably in the hold. "Leave it," Eleonora said, her voice dripping with boredom. "I'll have it all donated to Goodwill. In Omaha." The fight went out of Chloe. She stumbled after Damien, her espadrilles clacking on the cabin floor. Damien stood at the top of the air stairs, his face a thundercloud. He looked back at his wife, the woman he had dismissed, underestimated, and betrayed. "This isn't over, Eleonora," he vowed. Eleonora actually smiled, a real, genuine smile. "Oh, Damien," she said, "it is. You just haven't realized it yet. This isn't the end of the fight. This was just the eviction." She nodded to Marcus. "Get them off my plane." Damien Vance had never in his entire adult life been manhandled. He was a man who glided through the world, for whom doors were held and obstacles were removed. But when he hesitated at the top of the air stairs, trying to muster one last line of defiance, Captain Marcus Hayes took a single authoritative step forward. He didn't push. He simply occupied the space Damien had just been, in a subtle, physical command to move. Damien stumbled back, his pride stinging more than any physical blow. He turned and descended the stairs, not with the confident stride of a master of the universe, but with the hunched, furious shuffle of a man who had been defeated. Chloe followed a pathetic, weeping mess. Her Birkin bag was a comical counterpoint to her total collapse. She was a woman who had bet everything on a single horse, only to watch it break its leg at the starting gate. They stood on the cold, wind-swept tarmac. The November air bit at them. Chloe was dressed for the Caribbean. She was already shivering. My bags," Damien said lamely to the ground crew member who was watching impassively. Marcus's voice boomed from the top of the stairs. "Mr. Vance, your luggage was loaded into Hold 2. As this aircraft is now on an active flight plan, FAA regulations forbid us from accessing the cargo hold on the tarmac. You'll have to file a lost luggage claim." The ground crew member just shrugged. "Not my problem." From the cabin, Eleonora's voice, cool and amused, drifted down. "Oh, and Damien, that Patek on the console. Is that yours?" He'd forgotten it. His $150,000 watch was still sitting on the polished walnut. Before he could answer, Eleonora said, "Kira, be a dear, and put that in the galley safe. We'll have it appraised. I suspect it was also a corporate expense." That was it. That was the final, petty, perfect humiliation. "Close the door, Kira," Marcus commanded. The heavy, sound-proofed door of the Gulf Stream swung shut with a pneumatic, definitive hiss. The mechanism locked with a thud that echoed in Damien's empty chest. He and Chloe were alone on a vast expanse of concrete, 50 yards from the nearest building. The G650ER, her engines now whining to life, was an impenetrable silver fortress. "Damien, do something!" Chloe wailed, clutching his arm. "You can't let her do this. You're Damien Vance." "Shut up, Chloe," he hissed, yanking his arm away. "Just shut up." He was watching the plane, his mind frantically trying to find a way to rewind time. He'd made the wrong move. He should have stayed on the plane, fought the audit. But his pride. He saw a signature ground vehicle approaching a simple golf cart. It pulled up, and the driver, another impassive face, just looked at them. You can't leave us here," Damien yelled at the cart. "We need to get back to the terminal." The driver just pointed to the back of the cart. The walk of shame. Damien Vance and his mistress riding in the back of a luggage cart like common cargo. As they drove away, the Gulfstream G650ER N450EV began its slow, powerful taxi toward the runway. Inside the jet, the atmosphere had changed instantly. The oppressive, toxic tension was gone, vacuumed out with Damien. Eleonora sank into the plush leather seat, the exact one Damien had been sitting in. She was trembling. The adrenaline, the rage, the sheer will it had taken to see this through was finally hitting her. The flight attendant, Maria, wordlessly appeared at her elbow. The half-empty flute of Dom Rosé that had been Chloe's was gone. In its place was a fresh, clean flute, and Maria was pouring from a new bottle. Not the rosé. This was Krug Clos d'Ambonnet, a champagne so rare, so expensive, Damien wouldn't have even known to order it. It was Eleonora's favorite. "We kept this on ice for you, Mrs. Vance," Maria said with a small, knowing smile. Eleonora took the glass. Her hand was shaking so badly, she almost spilled it. "Thank you, Maria. Thank you all." Captain Hayes's voice came over the intercom, all business once more. "Mrs. Vance, we are third in line for takeoff. Flight time to St. Barthélemy is 3 hours and 22 minutes. We should have you on the ground well before sunset." Eleonora took a deep, shuddering breath. She looked at the glass. She looked out the window as the ground blurred the jet turning onto the active runway. "Marcus," she said, her voice catching but then strengthening. "You're a good man." "Just doing my job, ma'am." His voice came back, warm and professional. "Sit back and relax. The show is over." "No, Captain," Eleonora said, taking a long, slow sip of the Krug. The champagne was exquisite. "The show is just beginning." As the G6-50's two Rolls-Royce engines spooled up, pressing her back into the leather, Eleonora felt the G-force. It felt like liberation. At that exact moment in the signature terminal, Damien was trying to use his black card to call a car. Declined. He tried his corporate Amex. Declined. He tried his personal Chase Sapphire. Declined. It was 5:01 p.m. The injunction was live. The board meeting was over. He was locked out. Chloe, seeing the panic in his eyes, the failed transactions, finally understood. The god was a mortal. A broke mortal. I have Uber." She offered, her voice small. Damien didn't even look at her. He just walked out of the terminal into the cold and stood by the curb, a man with $1 billion name and not a dollar to it. While Eleonora's jet climbed to 41,000 feet, slicing through the stratosphere, Damien's world was collapsing on a cold concrete curb. His corporate Amex declined. His personal black card declined. It was 5:01 p.m. The injunction was live. Chloe, her face a mask of tear-streaked terror, finally got an Uber on her own account. The ride to the Soho apartment was a silent 45-minute funeral. When they arrived, a doorman who no longer smiled handed Damien a single, slim envelope. It was an eviction notice. The Vance Strategic Solutions lease had been terminated for fraud. He was to vacate in 24 hours. Tucked inside was a second, smaller note on Eleonora's personal stationery delivered by messenger. With it was a cheap, prepaid track phone. "I've deactivated your other lines," it read. "You'll need this to call a lawyer. E." The sheer, calculated pity of it was the final, crushing blow. Chloe, seeing the eviction notice and the burner phone, finally understood. The god was a mortal, a broke one. "You stupid, stupid man!" she shrieked, her adoration instantly curdling into contempt. "She beat you, grabbing her Birkin." She turned and fled, leaving him alone in the stolen apartment that was no longer his. He was a king with no crown, no castle, and not even $1 for a taxi. 3 hours later, the G650ER touched down on the St. Bart's runway, a perfect, smooth landing. The warm, humid Caribbean air greeted Eleonora as she stepped onto the tarmac, the sun a blaze of orange and purple. A private car whisked her to a secluded villa overlooking the ocean. She walked out onto the terrace, kicked off her heels and unpinned her hair. Her phone, silent until now, buzzed. It was a text from her father. "Assets frozen. He's been terminated. Well done. How's the weather?" Eleonora smiled, a real, genuine smile. She picked up the flute of Krug the villa staff had waiting for her. She typed back. "A little turbulent on the way, but I've taken over the controls. The view is perfect." She hit send, took a sip, and watched the sunset. She had lost a husband, but she had reclaimed her plane, her company, and her name. She hadn't just won. She had reigned. And just like that, the empire changed hands at 40,000 feet. Eleonora proved that the best revenge isn't just living well, It's taking back everything. What did you think of her power move? Was Damien's humiliation on the tarmac enough? Or should Chloe have faced more? We all know someone who's been underestimated like Eleonora. And this story is for them. If you love drama, karma, and stories where the strong woman wins, then you need to be here. Hit that like button if you were cheering for Eleonora. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss a story of justice being served. Share this video with someone who needs to see that the trophy wife always has the sharpest claws. See you in the next story.